All right, so welcome. My name's Andrew Neitlich. I'm the founder and director of the Center for Executive Coaching. Let me tell you a little bit about how I got into this, and then we'll jump in. The agenda today and the outcome I want for you is twofold. One, to understand what we're about. And my ask here is if you like the content and you have serious interest in executive coaching certification, and you think there's a fit with the way we teach and our approach, just reach out to me and we can talk about whether the program's right for you or not. We're particularly filling up for a seminar May 22nd through the 24th. It's virtual, no travel required. You leave certified and with our full distance learning program. And so I want to make sure you understand that as well. But most importantly, by the end, I want to give you an introduction to the foundational executive coaching conversation. We call it active inquiry. And we'll do an exercise to practice thinking about exactly how to structure what you say and what the best question possible is, or best thing to do or say is in a coaching session. Okay, we have scheduled here 90 minutes. Ask questions anytime via the chat if it's relevant to the content. I'll do my best to answer it. Just briefly, again, my name's Andrew Neitlich. I was a management consultant for a long time. And at a certain point, what I realized was that clients knew the answers, right? I could bring the best trained team from the best business schools and undergraduate schools and crunch all the numbers and present 500-page brilliant PowerPoints. At the end of that, clients would often say, hey, that's about what I was thinking, right? And then when we got down to it, even once I asked a client, I said, look, you know this answer you're telling me. Why did you spend this money on this kind of consulting work? And the client said, look, I know what I need to do. I don't know how to do it. And everybody's gunning for me. I don't have anyone I really trust that I can talk to. What I appreciate about working with you is I have a sounding board. I have a thinking partner. I have someone who can help me think about what I need to do, who I need to be as a leader to make this stuff happen. And I was pretty tired of getting on flights early in the morning and not being home. As a consultant. And so I said, let me see if I can just do this, where I just talk to leaders about the stuff they really want to talk about without all the bells and whistles of PowerPoints and analyses, because they really do know the answer. And if they don't, they have resources generally in their company who do. And so I started a coaching firm. I didn't even call it coaching at the time. I didn't know about the International Coaching Federation. This was around 2000. It was amazing. I mean, I did my life changed completely. I worked with amazing people on their most pressing issues from home. Every once in a while, they'd fly me to their organization. And it's just been terrific. Around, I don't know when, early 2000s, people started to come to me for training. I was also somebody who ran the training and development arm of our consulting firm for a bit. And I saw the opportunity to train others in coaching. Coaching was becoming a thing. And that's how we started the Center for Executive Coaching. And formally incorporated in 2006, accredited with the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, about, I don't know, it was either 2010 or 2012. Had the pleasure of writing a couple of guerrilla marketing books with the late J. Conrad Levinson, including Guerrilla Marketing for Coaches. And I continue to coach. I mean, what you see here is me in my home office in Sarasota, Florida, and just love what I do. We attract amazing people to the Center for Executive Coaching. We've really established ourselves as the leader in executive coach training for accomplished professionals, as you see on the screen. So, one of the things people say when they join is they're just amazed at the caliber of people they get to work with. And the people who join us tend to be practical minded. They're not academic. They're not theoretical. And they're not life coaches, right? We coach the whole person. That's important. But we're not pushing some sort of agenda or philosophy on you so that you have to push that onto your clients. What we're doing is figuring out what the client needs, figuring out what results and value means from the client's point of view, and going from there. The reason I have this screen up is it's our website. I just want to show you 2 pages. This is the reason we do these educational webinars, is for those of you who really are serious about getting certified. I just want to show you where to go, because there's a ton of information. What you want to do is click this Get Certified, right? We're at centerforexecutivecoaching.com. You click Get Certified. A great place to start is here, where it says Start Here. You'll see, the different options you have with us. You'll see what sets us apart. You'll get an overview of our approach. Right now, in particular, we're filling up for our virtual seminar. We're known for these 3-day virtual seminars. Our next one is in May. It's the last one we're going to have until September. Usually we do them every month, every other month, but we're going to have one May 22nd to 24th, and then not one until September. So if you do want to get certified with us, this is the place to go. Okay. We also have an in-person one taught by our West Coast faculty member in San Francisco. That's April 19th through the 22nd. That's 3.5 days. And if you're watching the recording, just check back here frequently. Our seminar is great. It includes our distance learning program and so on. You'll also see here, you can check out our full ICF program. If you're not sure you want any of that, you can do our core program, which gives you everything we have except the seminar and the ICF mentor coaching. Okay. So that's step one. The other thing I wanted to do, if it's okay with you, because I know some of you are joining the program right after this, is just give you an overview of what you can expect when you join, specifically showing you the member area. Okay. When you join us, you're going to get a member area that has a massive library of coaching methods and tools. Nobody comes close, both on the business development side, that is how to attract clients. Whether you're an internal coach or an external coach, you need to know how to position yourself properly. We talk about how to price, how to write proposals, how to sell without selling, how to get visible, how to write marketing messages. It's all there under this tab, Attract Clients. It's actually an amazing amount of resources, including business development guides, business nuts and bolts, proposals, selling, sales questions, marketing before and after, lots of things. But what I really wanted to show you was our content and tools. All right. You're going to get over 1,000 pages of coaching toolkits that you can use with your clients. And you can see the list in the menu on the left, right? We start with active inquiry, which is where we're starting here today. Except with active inquiry, you'll see there's like 6 hours of videos. So even though we teach live, you have at your disposal just a massive set of resources to work with clients on just about any issue they have, starting with active inquiry, the process of coaching, which looks at it from, excuse me, quite a few ways, you know, sort of an academic focus, a market facing focus, and a one-page coaching plan. Okay. And there's documentation and so on. We give you a whole survey course on how to assess the client and the situation. From there, we move to how to do a 360-degree verbal assessment, an executive level development plan that we call the Leader's Dashboard. You got to know how to do behavioral coaching. How do you help someone change a behavior? Perceptual coaching. How do you help someone shift a limiting belief without getting into therapy? Communicating simply and powerfully. And again, you know, just to show you, with all of these, you get a full methodology and you get a system, a series of videos. In this case, there were about 2 or 3 hours of videos. Okay. Nobody matches this. Okay. It's practical. You can hit the ground running with this kind of content. And I just thought it was important to show you for a moment, you know, what's included. There's influence conversations, overwhelm, which is huge these days, coaching clients on leadership presence, the personal domains, how to improve their network of relationships, how to engage and motivate employees. All of this is proven content. For instance, engaging and motivating employees. Personally, I've done this with my own clients, and they did a controlled study at one healthcare system that showed that this methodology led to a statistically significant improvement in employee engagement that they measured. Okay. Other things are resolving conflict, team coaching, which is hot right now, strategic planning, which you can do with a coaching model, leading change, succession planning, service excellence, coaching for careers, coaching, growing businesses. There's a whole methodology for that. Okay. So it's absolutely massive, the amount of content you get, and yet we're a boutique program. So we're here to support you anytime. Okay. How does this content stay relevant and up to date? We update the content every 2 years. It's largely evergreen, but we add things. For instance, in our current update, we've added quite a bit about diversity, quite a bit about delegation was something people requested. It was already in there, but we called it out. So we listen, right? We have members who ask for new content, and we keep it fresh. There's plenty of other things here. but, including you can match with other coaches to get your experience hours. We have affinity groups. So there are communities of coaches. Let me see here. For instance, coaches who are also in consulting, diversity, coaching and IT, marketing and selling coaching, leaders. So this is a great way to meet people. We believe it's not just your cohort. You can join us anytime, but it's common interests that people have. Okay. All right. I think that's enough on this. Let's get to active inquiry. Let me stop. Oh, actually, before we do, let's talk about the coaching market if we could, right? So we call it the Center for Executive Coaching. When we say executive coaching, we're thinking broadly. All right. It's not just coaching C-suite leaders at Fortune 500 companies. To us, executive coaching and leadership coaching refers to coaching anybody who's a leader. So a first-time manager, high potentials, people in nonprofits, for-profits, government. We're getting a lot of people in education now. And you get to choose. You can choose whether you're a solo coach, an internal coach, whether you contract with companies, whether you have coaches under you. It's really up to you. We work with you on a number of different models, and you get to choose your niche too. We have people focusing on technology, healthcare, nonprofits, diversity, women. We have a couple of people focusing on business owners who have strong Christian faith. It's really up to you. So it's a wonderful profession. We have people who are doing this as an encore career and just want to do it part-time while they do other things on the way to retirement. We have people who do it because they're already consulting, speaking, training, and they want to add coaching to what they want to do. Okay. The coaching market continues to grow. In fact, I'd say since COVID, it's grown even more. It's opened up more opportunities for you as a coach. I've seen it too, because Zoom took off. Teams, Microsoft Teams, essentially virtual video, took off. So where before a lot of coaches felt like they had to be local, or companies felt like they wanted a local coach, that's no longer the case. You can be a national or international expert. I'm coaching a multiple Grammy winning award musician right now who lives in Malibu. I'm coaching a family business out of southwestern Mexico. I'm coaching a venture capitalist out of Washington State. And it's amazing. If you look at the statistics about coaching as a field, it keeps growing. It's a proven professional development tool that many companies use. My particular preferred niche are growing organizations with really interesting dynamic leaders. One of the models we teach is how not just to be a pure coach, but to be a thought leader and a solution provider that offers multiple things. That way you can avoid going through HR and the coaching budget and actually reach decision makers with pretty significant consulting budgets. So we talk a lot about that too. All right. Any questions about the coaching market at this time? Yeah, with our program, once you download the tools, you can use the tools, read our terms and conditions. They give you either 2 or 3 years of access to the member area, but we don't kick you out. It's just our attorneys say that there has to be a limit. And in fact, there's no time limit. We say it takes 2 to 4 months to get our certification, 5 to 8 months to get the International Coaching Federation requirements met, but you can take longer if you wish. All right, well, let's get to what you came here for. And again, my ask is reach out anytime to see if this is a fit, but please, make sure you've at least reviewed the website and come informed so we can talk about your goals. Okay. So what I want to talk to you about today is the foundational executive coaching conversation. I want to show you our approach to this. This is where we start in our program. So if you're going to join us, this is a great orientation, and you can jump right in with us anytime, because once you have this down, you can jump onto our live classes. Okay. People are asking if the slide deck will be available. I generally don't give our content out except to members, if that's okay with you. Okay. Good. Let's see, I see a couple of questions on the chat before we get going. Everything you do in our program is ICF approved. Like with our 3-day certification, you'll get pretty much the live hours you need for ICF level 1. Okay, you still need self-study hours and mentor coaching. And at the end, you get our certified executive coach certification on the way to everything else. Okay. All right. So let's talk about this. Like, what does a coach do? What's a coaching conversation like? Coaching conversation is a really powerful, high impact conversation that helps your client have insights, move forward, and solve their problems. Okay. So the foundational coaching conversation, which we call active inquiry, largely consists of great listening and powerful questions. There's a lot more to it, but active listening and powerful questions, along with some reflecting, pausing, silence, really makes it happen. In any coaching situation, conversation, any session, we're going to get at the client's goals for the session, the goals they have for whatever dilemma they face. Like, what outcome do you want in this situation, in your life, in your career, with this conflict, with this relationship? And then we explore. And that's really where the magic happens. A good coach listens, explores, and challenges the client to learn about themselves, figure out and come to clarity about where they want to go, what they want to do, how they want to show up differently. And then, throughout, but especially at the end, we look at, so what happens next? What's your accountability to move forward? What did you learn about yourself? One of the things, and there are many, but one of the things that tends to separate coaching from, say, consulting is that we're looking at the who, not just the what. We're not just solving an analytical problem when we coach. We're looking at who the client is as a person, their background, their beliefs, their strengths, their values, their unique context and situation, right? So I'm not going to coach someone on like, where's the restroom? I can tell someone that. I'm going to coach someone on a situation that's unique to them, where it's not enough just to read a Harvard Business Review article or a Forbes magazine article. We have to figure out the client's unique response to their opportunity or challenge. The other thing about coaching that separates it certainly from consulting is we're doing a lot more stepping back and let the client guide the process. We're asking questions that give the client choices, that let them decide where they want to go. Yes, you can still give advice. Yes, you can still make observations, but we have to go where the client wants to go, not fight them on our advice or say, you must do it this way. The key to everything, as you'll see in an exercise we'll do soon, is if you listen well and keep the goal for the session in mind, the client tells you what to ask next. Okay, that's it. The client comes to you. They're telling you what to ask next. This is really hard. It's really hard for a lot of people who are leaders, who are already successful, because you're used to knowing the answer. You're used to fixing, diagnosing, solving, and telling people what to do. That's not what coaching is about. You have to step back, and the less you know sometimes, the better. Okay. What we're talking about here is a situation where you've already been engaged or hired, right? You have a coachable client, you have a clear scope. We're moving forward, right? Throughout the program, we'll talk about how to get to this point, but this is as good a place as any to start with the foundations, okay? So a good coaching session flow has 4 elements, really 3 elements, but sometimes there's a 4th. First, at the very beginning of any coaching session, what I'm going to do is say to the client, what would make this a great session? And we're going to explore that a little bit until I'm sure there's a clear goal. If you don't have a clear outcome for the client, or I should say, if the client doesn't have a clear goal or outcome for the session, your coaching is going to be really mushy. Sometimes therapists will say, where do you want to start? What's on your mind? That's fine for therapy. But when you're being paid what an executive coach is being paid, it's important to have an intent for the session. So I'll ask a few questions. I'll ask, what would be a great outcome? How specifically will we know this was successful? So I just want to start there. Once they tell me the outcome, I'm probably going to ask things like, well, what would be a great outcome in this situation? And then I'll ask, where do you want to start? For a new client, I'm probably going to have to explain what this thing is, right? Because sometimes clients, if all they hear is questions, they get uncomfortable. I'll have already done this before we're engaged, but just so 1 or 2 sessions in, I want to say, just as a reminder, what we're doing is called active inquiry. I'm going to ask you questions that I hope help you have insights and come to your own conclusions. Is that okay? You don't have to do that all the time, but just 2 or 3 sentences real quick, just to make sure they know what's coming. And then 3 is the magic, right? We're going to do active inquiry. That's what we're going to talk about here in this session. Just note, when you join our program, we don't use Zoom webinar. We use Zoom meeting. So it's very, very interactive. I'm going to break you into groups to practice. We're going to do demonstrations. We're going to do all sorts of really interesting exercises. We'll do one such exercise today, but it's not going to be as powerful as when we're in smaller groups working together. Okay. Yeah, Tanya, when you join the program, we talk about the range of pricing for coaches. It just depends on who you're coaching, what level, how you're structuring things. So we have a whole set of discussions about that. So when we conduct active inquiry, we're letting the client guide the process. I want to start with, where do you want to start exploring? What are your ideas to get there? Notice what that does. I don't want to say, what have you already tried? The client already knows what they've tried. I'm not going to waste their time with redundant questions where they know the answer. I'm not going to take their time to learn about their issue. I'm not going to take their time to understand the org chart. I don't need to know. Coaching, and this took me about 10 years to figure out, but coaching is really powerful when we let the client do the work, when we don't have to be the most clever. Okay. The other thing you want to do is once in a while check in on progress. So for me, if I have a 1-hour session, typically at 20 minutes and 40 minutes, I'm going to say, how are we doing? What insights have you had? Where are you at now? On a scale of 1 to 10, how close are you to achieving the goal you said you had for the session? And then I'll say something, if they say they're a 6 or a 7, I'll say, great. What can I ask you now? Or what do you want to talk about now to move closer to a 10? And then finally, a good coaching session closes strong. So if it's an hour session, I don't want to just at the very end, last minute, say, hey, we're almost out of time. What do can I send you a list of things to do? That's not coaching. Usually I want to leave 10 to 15 minutes to close. Let's say 12 minutes. I'll say, we're coming towards the end of our session. What would be the best way to wrap up for you? And I'll let them tell me. Some clients really want to get into the details of accountability. If you were coaching me, I would hate that. If I knew what I was going to do, I could do it. I don't need to be babysat or micromanaged. And so we can get into how the client wants to wrap up. What will help them move forward? What else do they have to think about? What are they going to do next? What insights did they have? What did they learn about themselves? And where should we start next time? These are some of the questions that will come up when you close. You don't want to just do a checklist. Again, we let the client decide. So any questions about this? Does any of this seem different than what you thought coaching was? And again, use the chat if you would, if you don't mind. And let's just take a moment and see. I don't know that I see anything here. Do you do prep between sessions for clients? The prep that I do is just in my head. For instance, I know I have a meeting with a client that is overwhelmed. He has so many relationships in his life, professional relationships. Again, he's a very creative type. He's an artist. And so he has like multiple labels and managers and this and that, social media, and he's struggling with that. So I don't like, it's not so much prep as I'm anticipating what could come up, where might he want to go. But the great thing about coaching is it's really up to the client to think about things. I might think about ways to structure it. Okay. Let me see. Is there an intake questionnaire? Yeah, I don't so much do an intake questionnaire or survey prior to the first meeting, because I'm going to have a meeting with the client and any sponsors and take as much time as is needed to get very clear on the engagement. Like when you join our program, we're very different than other programs. We're doing the type of coaching that top level executive coaches are doing in the market. And for most of them, a form won't do it. We really have to be there and listen to the client and see where the client wants to go. Okay. Roberta asked a great question that we're going to get to, which is there a way to combine coaching and consulting? So hold on a minute. Let me get to that. But I see something that says, great question, Rick. And I'm not sure if I see Rick's question. So maybe ask that again. Okay. So let me just tell you about advice here, and we'll go back to the questions. Okay. So here's the thing about advice. If you join to get an International Coaching Federation designation, generally the ICF is going to look poorly at giving advice. They don't consider that part of coaching. They consider that to be more consultative. We can certainly notice things, make observations like changes in energy, frustration, of course, things the client said, of course, using their words, but they might not think giving advice is coaching. So we're going to teach you that model. At the same time, I know when I'm hired and when most members of the Center for Executive Coaching are hired, that is, in the real world, in the market, clients want a thought partner, a brainstorming partner, a sparring partner, and sometimes someone who can weave in best practices based on their expertise. And so I would say it all depends on what you contract with your clients. When you join our program, we're very practical. We're very results focused, and we are very laser focused on what the client defines as value. And so it's okay to be hybrid. You just have to make sure, the client's good with that. And even some coaches, I find it clunky because clients don't care. Will say, hey, I'm stepping out of coaching mode now. Can I give you some advice? But what you see here, I think, is a really relevant set of guidelines about giving advice, okay? First of all, read the book, The Advice Trap. It's an excellent resource for those of you who know you have the temptation to give advice, right? There's a lot of problems with giving advice in coaching, right? You could already see I have a particular style. If I give a client that doesn't have my style advice, I'd say, be more blunt, be more assertive, step it up, speak more quickly, less words. For some clients, that's absolutely horrible advice, right? So I want to be curious. I don't want to bring in my own biases. I want to try to ask one more question. And so if a client says to me, Andrew, what's your advice? Like I had a client, he said, Andrew, am I a good leader? Now, I knew a little bit about him because I had done a 360 and interviewed a lot of people who work with him. I've seen some psychological assessments that we do and that you'll learn about in the program. But I'm not with him every day. So, what I say is, geez, I see you once every 2 weeks for 2 hours. What do you think? Right? It's really important to do that. Now, if the client's about to bring up something and you have expertise that relates to a best practice or a rule, like you happen to be an internal coach and there's definitely a clear do not date people who are not anyone in the company, and the client says, hey, I'm thinking of asking out my executive assistant. Well, by all means, call a timeout, jump in and say, may I remind you of our policy? Okay. But we could certainly do things like, hey, I hear you saying X, but not Y. Would you like to talk about Y? Or, when we started, you wanted to talk about Z, and now I hear you talking about A. Help me reconcile that. Or once in a while, could I make an observation or suggest a direction? But I promise you, if you give too many of those, your client will tune out. They'll tune out. When I first started coaching, I came from a management consultant background and I thought I was brilliant. And I'd give advice and I'd leave my coaching sessions feeling like a genius, except my clients never did them. Never did anything I advised. They'd nod politely, but I realized I was giving them advice if I were them. And it took me a little bit to figure out that if I would just ask them questions and let them figure out, even if it took longer, it would go great. And now, clients are much more favorable to me. I get a lot more referrals. I charge a lot more, and I do a lot less in terms of advising. So we work a lot on that. So, to Peter's question, how would we put coaching, mentoring, and elements of consulting in a mix? Very easy to do. You just want to contract with your clients. To me, the highest paid coaches, so to speak, out there are on their way to being trusted advisors. They consult when appropriate. They facilitate, they train, they teach. Having said that, for those of you who just want to be a pure coach, that's fine too. We show you how to do that. Okay, so hopefully that answers the question about advice. It's not an answer, but give it sparingly and really try to be more curious. And as the Advice Trap author says, ask one more question. If you don't, you can get yourself into liability. Coaches, a fundamental assumption of coaches is that clients are already effective and they're responsible for their decisions, choices, and actions. Okay. So what are some good coaching questions? Good coaching questions, and again, we'll do an exercise on this momentarily. They tend to be open-ended and they tend to move to the future. They also tend to be positive and appreciative, like building on momentum, skills, strengths. You can see a list here. In our program, we don't do generic check the box coaching. Other programs are pretty lightweight, in my opinion, and coaches tend to leave with the same 20 questions and they come across as pretty superficial. With us, again, you're going to get toolkits and coaching methods that tell you specific areas of inquiry to cover for particular challenges. That doesn't mean you tell, it doesn't mean you consult, but it does allow you to structure with the client the conversation and ask their permission to go in a certain direction, especially if coach and client get stuck or the client just truly doesn't know. Okay, so you can see these here. You know, what's in your control? What's working that you can build on? What are your ideas? Who does this well that you can model? If I go to the past, I might say, you know, what's a time that was similar to this that was successful, and how can you use lessons from that in your current situation? What else? That's a great coaching question. Silence, great coaching question. Just reflecting back, here's what I heard, or here's what I'm noticing about your facial expressions, and keeping quiet can be amazing. Okay. There's some things I think that coaches should not do, and it's worth noting this. According to the ICF, and I think you would know this too, you don't want to interrupt the client unless there's a clear stated coaching purpose to do so. For instance, some clients ramble on and they feel like they do have to educate you just as a courtesy about their job and everybody. You know, I might say to the client, listen, this may be how you process information, and if it is, please keep doing it. But if not, if you're doing this just as a courtesy to me, please know I don't need to know that. You know, I don't want to take your time getting trained on what you already know. Right? A coach, let's avoid stacking questions. We try to ask one question at a time. It used to be that there was a rule of thumb that the coach maybe talks 25% of the time. What the ICF now says is the coach should not talk more than the client. Right? It's not coaching if you're observing and directing the conversation without asking for permission or considering the client's input. Judging the client is also something that as coaches, we don't do, again, unless there's a clear legal risk, liability risk. They're talking about hurting themselves, then we got to step in. Again, that doesn't happen very often, though, if you pick clients properly. But judging the client is not just saying, I don't like your idea, but also saying, I like your idea. When you say that, you're validating something. And if they go and do it and it doesn't work, guess who they're coming to complain? They're going to say, you told me this was a good idea. What I prefer to do is say, wow, you sound really excited about this idea. How can you validate that? Or would you like to explore the pros and cons? You know, what would be most useful to you? Don't work with coaches, and don't be a coach that uses jargon. There are other coaching programs that use long words, jargon, made up words, and they will cause your clients to cringe, which I love, because then those clients fire that coach and hire people like me. Oh, Adia says, I skipped the third bullet. Distracting sounds like in a misguided effort to be supportive. So on Zoom, you have to be careful, and even more so on cell phones or where you're doing audio without video. First of all, there are sometimes delays, you know, with technology. And second of all, if you're constantly saying, that becomes distracting, cloying, and annoying. There are some coaches who come from education and they sound like kindergarten teachers with their clients, for instance. They're saying, oh, Of course, we can make a sound or two to make sure the client knows we're engaged, present, and we've heard them. Some coaches do it so often that it's cloying just to listen to their recordings, which I do quite a bit. Okay. All right, let's see where we're at. I think we have a pretty good sense of where we're at. There's plenty more to do here, but I think we could go to an exercise. Let me just take some more questions first. We're moving nicely along. Tanya's asking, and for those of you who already have an ICF credential, you do receive a scholarship for your previous training. So the two programs that are right for you are either our core program, or if you go where it says for seasoned coaches on our website, we have our toolkit. You could just get our toolkit of solutions. There's no scholarship for that, but we just carved that out for you. So take a look at the website. Anyway, any surprises, anything that struck you about coaching? We're going to do a little exercise now so you can see, you know, what it really looks like. Again, unfortunately, because I don't know you, and you know, we're on Zoom webinar versus Zoom meeting. We can't do what we would do in our actual classes, but we can do something. All right, so let's play around. I have an exercise here called, what are you going to ask next? Okay, and I have a bunch of scenarios that come up. Again, with our program, it's very interactive, very practical, very much about real clients with real situations. So you'll see here, we have a few client situations. Like here's one where their goal for the session is to come up with 2 to 3 strategies to stop being overwhelmed with too many competing priorities, right? So I'll show you that one in a minute. Hold on a minute. Let me keep scrolling down here. Forgive me as I try to figure out how to do that. There we go. We have one for my vice president of sales is not performing and I need to make a decision about what to do. We have one about the client feels overlooked. Others are getting promoted before her. And she's frustrated. She's not getting the preferred assignments. We have a client who is come to coaching because his career is potentially derailed. I get a lot of clients like this. I think Huffington calls them the brilliant jerks. These are people with sharp elbows. They're brilliant. They're great at what they do. You see them in technology companies, healthcare, law firms, consulting firms, universities, but they have certain behaviors they need to change if they want to move up or even sometimes keep their job. We have one about a team that's not performing. Again, we have a million of these. I'm just extracting a few here. So why don't we start with the first? And here's what we're going to do. We'll play around in the chat. Okay, so be ready to get in the chat. And what I want you to do is really focus in on your listening and thinking, here's what the client just said, right? The puzzle I gave you earlier was, if you know the client's goal, which is listed right here, and you hear what the client just said, we should be able to come up with something to say that builds from that without getting into therapy, which gets into the emotional past, and without directing, telling, giving advice. So let's say the client just starts with, I'm in a constant state of stress. And again, we know they want 2 to 3 strategies to stop being overwhelmed. What might be a great coaching question? Yeah, Chris has a good one already in the chat. Tell me more about that, right? Gerard says, what professional situations or triggers have you observed that have created a feeling of stress recently? Yeah, that's a little directive. We're going down a rabbit hole of, which is fine, maybe. I might say, would you like to explore where specifically you feel stress, right? Moving from constant state to specifics. Barbara says, what triggers you? Yeah, that could be interesting. What are your top 2 stressors? That could be a great way to get specific. Say more. What else? Okay, good. There's good stuff here. Tell me more. All of these are fine, right? I think where I'm at the beginning is I want to start at a high level and say, where would you like to start exploring this? Sometimes as a coach, I also want to move a client that's complaining to a positive place. So I might say, hey, maybe would it be interesting to start with what it would look like if you weren't in a state of stress? Once we have the positive outcome, then we could say, great, wait, how can we get from where you are to where you want to be? Right. I noticed a lot of the questions here would encourage the client to stay negative. Sometimes coaches are about creating a sense of possibility and positivity. All right. So now the client says, well, look, I need a couple of ideas to get some traction. What would be a great, powerful question here? Again, their goal is 2 to 3 strategies to stop being overwhelmed. And then they specifically said, I need a couple of ideas to get some traction. What would you say here? What might be a good question? By the way, there's no perfect question. What I found in my own practice is if I'm present and listening and let the client figure things out, they usually do. So Tom says, what have you thought of so far? Again, I don't love questions that the client already knows, right? The client specifically saying, I need a couple of ideas, right? Same thing. What has worked in the past? I don't love that because they already know, unless we can move them forward. Yeah, Sydney says, what ideas come to mind for you? Do you see what that question does? It follows exactly the language and content the client just provided, right? I need a couple of ideas. Well, what ideas come to mind for you? That's great. Right? So I might say, you say you need a couple of ideas. If you had to come up with 2 right now, what would they be? Right? That ties right to the goal and what the client said. This is the trick in coaching, is how close can we get to what the client said and sort of empty our mind of where we want to go. Okay. So for instance, have you ever felt this way in the past, or what feelings are you trying to change? Perfectly fine to explore feelings, but the client's not talking about feelings here. They're talking about ideas. So we want to go where they want to go. All right, so look, now the client says, one thing I notice is I spend a lot of time traveling and I can't get work done during those times. So we've moved from a very general state of stress down to one specific area. What might be a powerful question here that really responds to what the client is saying? What do you think here? So client says, all right, so Corey says, is the traveling necessary to your success? Okay, it's a yes, no question. That's diagnostic. It's suggesting, again, could work. Why do you think that's the case? Okay. Quick thing about why. Like when I ask my kid a why question, like, why haven't you done your homework? How do you think that feels like to him? Right? It feels interrogative. Also, when we ask clients why, they often don't know the answer. It turns out they make something up. Why is great to learn about people's limiting beliefs and perceptions, but I try not to ask too many why questions. So again, one thing I notice, I spend a lot of time traveling. I can't get work done during that those times. Right. So someone says, stop traveling. I know he was joking, but that's a great example of being directive. Right. Good. Rowdy says, I like this one. What would be a way to gain more time during traveling to get the work done? Right. What's holding you back from getting work done? Again, I prefer things stated in the positive, right? That's not an ICF thing. I've just found clients already know what's holding them back. They'll tell us. So I'd prefer the more positively framed question we just heard. Just a personal preference is, how can you travel and get work done, right? Or maybe higher level, right? We don't know. Is it about the traveling? I worked with a client that traveled a lot, driving around from hospital to hospital. She was the CEO of a big system, and all she needed to do was hire a driver. She was just too frugal, but the board said, we're open to a driver. That way you can work in the back. So we don't know, right? So maybe we just ask them and say, well, if you could solve this problem, how would you do it? Okay, right. Again, because the client wants 2 to 3 strategies and so on. All right, so let's go to another thing. Let's say the client says, I have 2 bosses because we're in a matrix organization. One of my bosses subscribes to the adage, if you want something done, give it to the busiest person you can find. So that's what they just said. So they've identified something else. It's not just travel. It's a boss that gives the work to the busiest person they find, keeps adding to their plate. What would be a good coaching question here? Keeping in mind everything that's been discussed and the goal. What do you think? It's good. And by the way, all your questions are fine. Once a coaching conversation gets going, it's like an airplane. It doesn't just drop out of the sky. Okay, so have you discussed this with your boss? They already know the answer to that, right? What's a powerful, have you pushed back? Again, that's a yes, no question based on somebody who probably would push back. How can you advocate for a change? You see the difference in that question. It's much broader. It's looking at, how can you advocate? Not have you push back, which is yes, no, but an open-ended, how can you? Right? Rowdy says, what's the reason your boss is suggesting that? Again, interesting question, but it's just because that's how the boss is, right? Yeah, okay, Sydney I like Sydney's question. What change would you like to see happen with him? The reason I think that's a powerful question is because it opens up possibility and it's focused on the boss. The other thing we could do here is take a step back, right? And say, hey, I've heard a couple of themes, right? You said you're in a constant state of stress. You want a couple of ideas to get traction, and that's really the goal of the session. And you've mentioned 2 areas, right? You've mentioned the travel time and how you can't get work done. You've mentioned one of your 2 bosses. Where would you like to go here? We could keep brainstorming, or we could look at either one of these and go deeper, right? So some of you are making the assumption they want to talk about the boss. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're the type of person that likes to get lots of ideas out on the table, right? If they do want to talk about the boss, then Samson's question is great. What options do you have to tackle this with your boss? Okay, and you can see this continues. It's pretty tactical, right? This person's laying out issues. 2 colleagues aren't doing as much as I am. My other boss is an alpha dog, something about that. And then, they get to my kid asked me if I was at my other home the other day when I called him at the airport. So there's a lot that we can unpack with this, but hopefully that's a good first example. Let's go to another one. Let's skip that one. All right, here's a good one. This is actually pretty common these days. Client says she feels overlooked. Others are getting promoted before her, and she doesn't feel like she's getting the preferred assignment. So the goal is, presumably, this is not a very clear goal, but would be, what do I do about this? Okay. This is a big area of coaching right now in a lot of companies. So the client says, I'm angry. I was told I'd be promoted this past cycle and I got passed over. It's the second time. What might be a great or powerful question or response? What do you think? Did they share reasons for that? Okay. What else? Let's get a bunch on the table. Why do you think that is? Were you provided clear goals and expectations, right? So that's, again, we're diagnosing when we ask that question. It could be good, but I bet we can be more powerful. What do you think you could do to get noticed? That's the pros of that approach is it's positive. It's moving positive. Again, were you provided any directives when this was explained? That's something I think an HR partner would ask. A coach could certainly ask it. Yeah, Tiffany gets right to the bottom line. So, what can we do differently this time? Here's where I'd be at. The client has expressed an emotion. They're angry. Presumably they're going to sound angry, although we can't see that in word. Maybe we need just a little bit of time to say, it sounds like you're really frustrated. Would you like to talk more about it? It might be before this client is coachable, we have to let them have the space to vent a bit and talk about their anger. Right. And then, yeah, certainly then we can get to these what questions that we see. It sounds like it's 2 times. It sounds like you're frustrated. I get it. What do you think would be a strategy that will help you get promoted this cycle? Or maybe they don't even want to talk about that. Maybe they're done, right? We don't even know. That's why it's so important to open this space for listening. I say, what do you want to explore about this? I'd probably also ask, and at some point, I want to get clearer on their goal for this session, right? I know what their complaint is, but I don't know what they want from me as the coach from this conversation. All right, second row. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I'm a woman in a male organization. They say they care about diversity, but you wouldn't know it from the facts. What do we do here? Second row. See that question? Now, this is a really challenging coaching conversation. It's a really interesting issue that comes up quite a bit these days, right? What would be something to say here? Okay, Corey says, do you see a future for yourself at this company? Interesting. That's what you call a provocative yes/no question. Sometimes that can be a really powerful way to change the cadence. Samson says, what makes you think so? Okay. What else? Can you tell me more about that? Yeah, Jassim, I think that's a great question here. One of the things that coaching is about that we want to be careful about, the ICF has a great case study about that. Like, it could be tempting to say, well, I don't believe all this diversity stuff. I don't believe, I believe this is a merit-based organization. So I'm going to debate this person. I'm going to act like an attorney. I'm going to look for facts, prove it. How do you know this is it? How can you find out? Be very careful of that, right? That might be where we're coming from. What coaching is about is letting this client explore and say, tell me more about this. Where are you at here? How are you thinking about this? Okay. Third row. Other than that, let's say, so we talked about the diversity issue a bit. I have no idea. My performance reviews are good. I have a mentor who's as surprised as I am that I got passed over. She was pulling for me. What might be a good, powerful question there? Who else can you look to for feedback? Great. That's good. What else matters for promotion, do you think? Good. What else is your mentor telling you? Yeah. Or I really like how can you, what conversation can you have with your mentors to have them help you find out? What can you learn from this? Good. All great questions. Okay, so now we're getting to maybe something that can open the door a little bit to some specific actions. The feedback I've been getting is that I need to know more members of the leadership team. Okay, what do we say here? What could be a good, powerful question? Again, Joy says, is talking with your boss directly an option for you? That's a yes/no suggestive question, right? But, it might be interesting. Sometimes it's really interesting. Some clients have blind spots about that. Like there's a clear conversation to have and they don't want to. Okay, good. So yeah, good. What does that look like? What are some good approaches? How could you realize that? How can you wow the leadership team? That's a nice positive question. How could you do that? Great. Let's build a plan. I would say, would you like to build a plan, and ask their permission? But I appreciate where you're going with that. How could you accomplish that? Great. Notice the shift in questions here, right? With this, now I think we're really getting to, okay, good. There's an opening, and we can, based on what the client wants to do, we can ask their permission or start moving in the direction of that. Okay, good. Let's go to this one here. This is a good one. So we've talked, and it seems like there's either the mentor or one other partner, and the client says, both love me, so they say, but maybe they don't have the clout needed, or maybe they aren't advocating for me, even though they say they are, or maybe they don't know how to advocate for someone because they're also new in their roles. I'm not sure. What might be a great question here? This is interesting, right? The clients put a bunch of stuff out on the table, a lot of maybes. How can you get more clarity? Great question. Notice these powerful questions that seem to work are short, pretty high level often, and really let the client take a moment and pause and think. What my clients tell me, and a lot of executive coaching clients say, is the power of coaching is they get an hour, 2 hours, a half hour, whatever it is, to talk about stuff they'd never talk about. They're always in the weeds. They're always going from one thing to another. It's the space to do it. Okay, good. What's your ideal outcome? We could go back to that. What else? What would an advocate ideally do for you? Great question. Again, we're getting into something positive, outcomes based. All right, let's do one more, and then I'll take any questions you might have about coaching, the program, you name it. All right, this is a great one. Okay, like I work with a lot of folks like this. I have a client, we just wrapped up, and I mean, the board and the CEO of this was an investment firm, were furious at him for some of the ways he was demonstrating abrasive behavior. And he was very coachable, right? He didn't even realize he was doing it. A lot of technical people have blind spots. They don't know how they're coming across to others. Okay, so let's see. So he wants to, first of all, we have a behavioral coaching process that can change behaviors that are not working and replace them with new habits that are much more positive and effective. So that's part of what you get with this program. We have tools for all of these conversations, in fact. But let's say the client says, I think I said one thing a year ago to a direct report who went to HR. That got me into a lot of hot water and has had a long tail. I don't think I'm as bad as they're making me out to be. In other words, he's saying it was one event really that got me into this hot water. What would we say there? What did you learn from that hot water situation? Great. What I like about what Adia did there is use the client's own language, hot water. That's great. How would you approach that same situation differently today? Good. What should you do about that? What are your strengths? What are your areas you want to work on? That's a great question. I'm not sure it drives directly from what the client just said, though. What can you do to change their perception? Very insightful. Great question, right? Because I don't think I'm as bad as they're making me out to be. So good. What can you do to change that? Comes directly from the client, right? And, Sydney says she'd want to know what the one thing was. You'll know, because remember, we're only in a coaching session here. We've done a lot of work to get to this point. So you've heard what the situation was, right? So that's right. Are you the same person today? How do you see yourself? Okay, that's stacking two questions. But, this is interesting. I don't think I'm as bad as they're making me out to be. That's great. We have that opportunity to say, great. If that's accurate, what do you see doing here so that you can both change the perception and make sure you don't repeat that behavior, right? We're getting somewhere. Or, would you like to explore that or brainstorm some other things that are going on? So the second row, I don't think people understand the pressure I'm under. I have few full profit and loss responsibility. No one else here does. Ultimately, I'm the one who's accountable for this division's success or failure. What might be the best response here? Okay, good. Yeah, Suzanne says something that we talk about in our program. Let's just back up. What are the behaviors? Arrogance is a conclusion as a result of behaviors. Right, we teach that in our course. We haven't really broken down the arrogant behaviors yet, right? Or maybe we have, and I just haven't put it in this spreadsheet. right? Be careful when you're coaching someone about things like passive aggressive, procrastination, arrogance. We want to get away from subjective themes and focus in on specific behaviors. If you haven't heard the pearl necklace analogy, imagine a necklace with lots of pearls. Each pearl might be a behavior associated with arrogance, right? Gritting their teeth, interrupting, leaving early, coming late, dismissive. When we can get a client to identify those pearls, we can then break them down and work on the specific behaviors. Okay, good. Jasim, though, has a good question specific to what the client said, which is how can you let people know that? What would it look like? I like this idea. What would it look like if people truly understood the pressure you're under? Where do you think the most pressure comes from? Thomas goes right to delegation. How can you empower your team to take some of the pressure off you? Great question, but there might be many ways the client wants to look at that, right? Maybe it's delegation, maybe it's something else. Before we diagnose, before we decide which area that we would go to, maybe we got to understand what the client's thinking. Like, I want to know, what do you want to talk about here? It sounds like you're frustrated because people don't understand the pressure you're under. We could take this in a lot of directions. Where would you like to go? I like a high level question like that, right? I've reflected back the feeling so the client knows he's heard. And then I'm letting the client make the choice, right? Just keep that in mind, whether you join our program or not. Sometimes the best coaching questions are the simplest, okay? All right, look, now the client says, what row is this? Third row, after the client says, I think some of the people in this company need to develop thicker skin. What might be a good response to that? So the client's essentially saying, it's not me, it's them. Okay, so I see, do you believe that right away? I know is going to be a yes, no question. But it could be good. That's a good provocative question. Does the head of a division have to adapt communication? All right. Adia says, what would it look like if people develop thicker skin? That's okay. I don't know where we're going to go with that, though. But yeah, what does thicker skin look like? That's okay. I mean, I might ask something like, I hear you, and that's something that's in their control. What's in your control? Right. I might, yeah, like Jennifer's getting there. How would others having thicker skin help you? But eventually, maybe we have to get to, great, that's something they need to do, but I'm coaching you, right? What choices can you make, given that it's not in your control whether they develop thick skin or not? Stephanie has, I think, a brilliant question that could lead to, what changes can you make as a leader to support others? Tom, let's test that theory if you're open to it. Good. I like the, at least the getting the client's permission. Okay. Paul says, why do you think this? Again, I don't love the why questions, but okay. I mean, maybe we got to let the client vent about it. All right, good. Let's see. All right, so I love this one. So the client says, which is more important here? Is it results or is it being kind and gentle? It's frustrating because I'm starting to think that the company cares more about kind and gentle until the results stop happening. That's great. So the client's sharing with us what they're thinking here. What would be a good coaching question that could maybe help the client shift and be better? Great. Both performance and kindness. Perfect. We saw a bunch of you have seen the tyranny of the or here. And you're asking a question about, look, how can you have both? Great. Love it. Okay, good. Let's see if there's any others. I think you get the ideas. Well, let's just do a few on this team. A new team is not performing. We have a great team coaching module, more than a module approach. So the client wants to come up with strategies that the client can implement to get the team performing better. All right, let's just do one or two. Let's see. Let's go to the second one. One team member in particular doesn't even seem to be on board with our goal or approach. What would be a great coaching question there? What do you think? One team member. Let's see, what can you do to bring this team member on board? Perfect. What are your ideas? Or what would it look like if they were on board? Maybe we start with that. And then, yeah, Lisa Jane said, how can you help them? Great. All right. Rick has a good question. Many of these scenarios, I could easily pull some real life examples of my own to share. When do you pull that in? I would suggest you don't. Back about 10 years ago, there was a whole slew of former CEOs who became coaches. And really what they were, in my opinion, were windbags who just wanted to tell people about their successes and what they did. And that really, to me, takes away. If you're a mentor, fine. It's interesting to tell stories. As a coach, it's certainly okay to say, look, I've been there. I can relate. That builds rapport. But you got to keep in mind that like your style is different. So for instance, you've seen my style here on video. I don't, it's not, I worked with somebody to help me give better short form videos, like 2 minutes. Now she was an actress. She could sing. Her face could light up in ways mine couldn't. And all she was doing throughout the whole thing was telling me how to do it if I was her. She was even telling me what to say. And I got so frustrated because I couldn't do what she was doing. None of it, not one thing. And she started getting angry at me. It was like the worst coaching experience I ever had. And she's telling me, well, let me tell you about the time when I was da-da-da. I'm like, I don't care. I just got to get this video out. Can you help me or not? I can do a little bit, but I can't do what you're doing. And it was killing me. And you don't want to have your client have that kind of awkward, uncomfortable experience. Anyway, good questions here. How can you help them? What are their strengths? What do you think is going on? I don't love what conversations have you had. I do love what conversations might you have. Okay, let's see what else here. All right, here's a good one. Here's a metaphor. I love when clients use metaphors because we can be curious about them. I don't know if you're a New England Patriots fan. If you are, I hope you also got to experience the New England Patriots in the 1970s when they would go 1-13 or 1-12 or whatever. So I'd say our team is more like the New England Patriots in the 1970s than the New England Patriots when Tom Brady was there. What would be a great coaching question there? What do you think? How can you be a Tom Brady? Wow, great question. That works just on the exact metaphor, exact language, right? Do you want Tom to come back? You see that? I don't know that that's helpful. Say more about that. Yeah, I think if in doubt, that's always a great question. So yeah, how can your team be like the New England Patriots now? Or let's use that metaphor if you're open to it. Would you like to explore, what about your team is like the Patriots then and what it would take to get your team to be like the Patriots when Tom Brady was there? Yeah. Do you want to unpack this more? Great. One last one. There are so many issues. I'm not even sure where to start, right? So this client's listed a bunch of stuff and now we're back to, we've made progress, let's say, but now the client says, there's so many issues. I'm not even sure where to start. What's a great coaching question here? What comes to mind first? Good one. What are the top two? Great. We get them focused. What's most pressing for you right now? Here's another great coaching question. It's a weird one. And intellectually, it doesn't make sense, but it works almost every time. It's if you were sure, where would you start? It's this weird thing. It taps into another part of the brain. If you were sure, like if you did know, what would the answer be? I didn't come up with that, but every time I've used it, it's worked and it makes no sense. Okay. All right. Let's stop here. Let me go back to the website here, if I could. And let's just get any questions you have about the program or coaching in general. I'm happy to answer. Again, I'm going to turn this off record and then take your questions. But again, the purpose of my doing this webinar is to make sure you're aware of, and if you're interested, you sign up for our May seminar. It fills up fast, and we're not doing another one until September, none in the summer. Usually we do them every other month. So if you want to get certified in 3 days and still have access to the whole program, like we have 12 hours of classes every week, all the tools, please sign up for that. But if a 3-day seminar virtual is not your thing, go here and just see, the overview of our programs and our approach and everything else. Okay. And you can see again, everything, how it works, what our agenda is. Luis, it's not too late to sign up for the in-person April seminar. And hold on, let me take this off record here just so we can get to questions. Those of you listening to the recording, obviously these dates have probably passed. If so, just reach out if you want a strategy session. Okay.